Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Reactions continue to trail the suspension with immediate effect of political appointees and office holders in Rivers State by President Tinubu's appointed sole administrator, retired Vice Admiral Ibok Ete Ibas. In a statement on Wednesday, the Chief of Staff to the administrator said the decision was made under the powers granted to Ibas by President Bola Tinubu. Those affected include the Secretary to the State Government, the Chief of Staff, all commissioners, chairpersons and members of boards, agencies, commissions and parastatals, as well as all special advisors, special assistants and senior special assistants. Ibas, who is a former Chief of Naval Staff, vowed to maintain law and order in the state and promised to work together with other stakeholders to ensure that order is restored in Rivers State. Joining us now on the show from Port Harcourt, Rivers State, to review the decision of the sole administrator is Dame Aleruchi Cookey-Gam, former Honorable Attorney General and Commissioner of Justice to former Governor Odili in his first term, Secretary to the State Government in Odili's second term, and former Administrator of Greater Port Harcourt City Development Authority. Good morning, Dame Cookey-Gam, and welcome to the morning show.
Good morning. And thank you for having me.
Well, good morning, and thank you for joining us. Very quickly, some of these persons that the sole administrator has now further suspended, some of them have tenured positions, but the administrator has made it clear that he's acting on the basis of powers conferred on him by the President of the Federal Republic, who initially had suspended both the executive and the legislative arms of government in Rivers State. Is it possible for those political appointees to stand on nothing?
Well, it's important for us to understand where we are with the state of emergency that has been declared in Rivers State. But I believe most Rivers citizens and residents have been surprised by the several steps that are being taken. And the recent one that was announced 2 days ago, suspending political appointees of concern, particularly because of the statutory boards that are recognized under the Constitution and tenured. It kind of departs from what is expected that the administrator should be doing at this time, particularly because some of those boards, for instance, the Rivers State Independent Electoral Commission Board, and I believe the Board of Internal Revenue, and several other parastatals are involved. I can understand the political appointees like the commissioners or the secretary to government, since he has already appointed a secretary to government, but certainly not the tenured boards. And it's of concern and worry to citizens.
Okay, are you then questioning even the legality of the appointment of a sole administrator? People in Rivers State even have added another name. They call him surrogate. They say he's a surrogate. I bet he's a sole administrator. And the question is, if he's acting on powers conferred on him, can he not be the sole administrator as pronounced?
Well, the first thing is to look at how he came about being appointed, because the president who has appointed him does not have the powers to appoint, to remove elected officials of government, to remove the governor of the state, similarly, remove the deputy governor, Professor Ngozi Odu, and all elected officials of the Rivers State House of Assembly, and appoint a sole administrator in provision can allow, and it's unconstitutional, and if that is the case, then we question the appointment of the administrator as well.
All right. Thank you very much, Dame Cookey-Gam. So right from the very beginning, even the appointment of the sole administration, talk more of the actions it's taken in the last few days, have come under scrutiny as to the legality of it. From your perspective, what are the actions to be taken? Because it seems like at every step or for every step of the way, the people complain, then they accept. So for instance, initially there were complaints and kickbacks to the president's appointment of, well, first the declaration of state of emergency as to whether or not it was warranted. That was left behind. The second, the appointment of a sole administrator. After a few kickbacks, that's gone a bit quiet. And now the sole administrator is taking charge in the state. And part of his first actions is to sack political appointees. At what point will the people of Rivers State, all those who have jurisdiction, take action? And what are the actions or what are the options available?
Well, several options are available to persons directly affected by the exercise of the powers by the president. And I believe that suits will be filed against the unconstitutional acts of the president. On the path of the citizens, there isn't much that can be done since the sole administrator has taken office. But in carrying out his responsibilities, he has to be neutral and he has to be unbiased. But if he starts tampering with structures, particularly those that are recognized under the Constitution of tenured officers, then it becomes a problem to any person who's watching the actions of the sole administrator. I believe he may necessarily have to have someone he calls the secretary to government to carry out some of his assignments. But emergency rule is temporary. And what we would like to see is a situation where things come back to normal as quickly as possible. It's a temporary measure. It's a stopgap, even though we believe that the problems in Rivers State had not gotten to the stage where we would have usurpation of powers of elected officials, but that's where we find ourselves now. And in that situation, we expect things to be fast-tracked so that we can come back to normalcy and we have our elected officials occupying their rightful positions, both the governor, the deputy governor, and the House of Assembly members.
Okay, madam, what we've been told is that the suspension is for 6 months in the first instance, which means that the sole administrator is there for 6 months in the first instance. Now, you talked about the people of Rivers State. He has just appointed recently a secretary to state government who accepted the appointment. What if he decides to make other appointments, even appoint commissioners, even fill some of those positions in which he has suspended some people? You know, from the mood of the people of Rivers State, will you be surprised if people jump forward and occupy those positions? After all, some people have been going there to pay homage to the sole administrator. What would be your reading of the situation?
My reading of the situation would be that I expect that Rivers indigents should stand up at a time like this for their state to be counted. What has happened in Rivers State is unacceptable, and as much as possible, there must be concerted effort put in place to make sure that things come back to normal in Rivers State. This is not a time to look for appointments or to pretend that you want to serve the state. What we have before us is an anomaly. And in saying what I say, I want to refer both Mr. President, who has appointed the sole administrator, and the sole administrator to the provisions of the Constitution that provides for what should happen in a situation where, as said by the Supreme Court, no appropriation law is in place. And that is Section 120 and 121 of the Constitution. how monies can be spent from the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the state in circumstances there's no appropriation law. And Section 122 provides that in such a situation, all that can happen is that the governor will be able to expend monies for needs that meet the requirements of the state. Now, if we translate that to what is happening now, we do not expect that the sole administrator is going to be embarking on any capital projects. His primary responsibility is to bring back law and order. Well, as far as we were concerned, there was no breakdown of law and order. Now, that is his primary responsibility, and also to ensure that there is safety and security for all. Now, the expenses of state that he will be taking care of at this time will be the salaries of all workers and recurrent expenditure. So I don't see how the sole administrator is going to require a full cabinet of commissioners, because every ministry, department, and agency have permanent secretaries who are civil servants, and they are the heads of the government departments. They are in a position to guide the sole administrator as to who are the salaried employees, and also at the local government level, the HPMs also are the heads of the local governments when there is no elected official. So in other words, the summary of what I'm saying is that there is a limit to the powers that can be exercised by the sole administrator, and we don't expect to see him come up with a big array of commissioners to be carrying out any responsibility. We saw the sole administrator at the Rivers State House of Assembly complex yesterday, which is an ongoing project, and I believe that he may want to see that that is a completed project, and that's about it.
All right, ma'am, thank you. I hear you. And on paper, that's, like you've mentioned, legally, that's what ought to happen. But is that the reality on ground, especially as the state allocation has been released in its fullness to the sole administrator? In 6 months, it is almost, I don't know how possible it would be, especially even for the benefit of the Rivers State people, not to have any capital projects, not to have any ongoing projects going on. Is this possible? Don't forget, even if he makes appointments, he may not name them or term them as commissioners. There are many names that he could use at his disposal. So I keep asking the question around, people might complain, but is there anything that can be done? At least so far, nothing seems, only just coming out to talk about what ought to be done, but not being followed. Even some Rivers State people have gone behind to accept positions like Dr. Bati had identified. So even the people within almost seem like they are happy with this structure and willing to let it happen, let it go for the next 6 months.
I speak for myself and on behalf of a group, the Rescue Rivers. And the Rescue Rivers are a group of professionals, indigents of the state, who are completely disillusioned and alarmed by what is happening in the state. Because at the end of the day, all we are concerned about is the economic well-being of the state. So, if the sole administrator has to carry out his responsibilities, we still maintain it has to be limited responsibility, and they have to be guided by the Constitution. The concern of most citizens of the state is that our treasury is going to be looted. And Mr. President, even in exercising his powers, also knows that there must be some form of accountability. And I believe that one of the terms of reference of the sole administrator cannot be to carry out any new projects or award any contracts. There is nothing so earth-shattering that the priority now is to set things in motion to ensure that normalcy returns to Rivers State so that elected officials can assume the responsibility of administering the state.
Okay, madam.
The sole administrator position is an aberration.
Okay, madam. The sole administrator obviously doesn't see anything wrong with his appointment. He says he's from the Niger Delta, and he's one of you in Rivers State. I think he used that expression, I'm one of you. So he expects that, he should be allowed to feel at home. Do you consider him one of you? That's one. Number two, you seem to have made an exception for his promise to rebuild the State House of Assembly complex in 6 months. You said, well, that's an ongoing project. What if there are other ongoing projects, and there must be, that are capital projects? We also make a similar excuse for him that he can do those ongoing projects even if they are capital projects.
I refer to that specifically because if you recall the president's speech, he specifically said that the governor of the state had taken no steps to rebuild the House of Assembly. So for anybody who was listening to that speech, you will think that nothing had been done. So it was reassuring to see the sole administrator inspecting the project. And because that project houses the House of Assembly of all elected officials, I believe that the sole administrator will want to ensure that in handing over, he's able to, if not conclude the House of Assembly, he must put in place a suitable place for elected officials of the legislature to be able to operate. But for any other ongoing projects, I do not believe that it's priority at this time.
But do you consider
and then
him
you said about him being
one
from the
of
South
you
South.
in,
Yes,
in the
he's
Niger
from the
Delta?
South.
So is he one of you in
He's
Rivers
from the
State
South
too?
South. He's from Niger Delta. No, he's not one of us. Under no circumstances can he run for elective office here. So he's not an indigene of Rivers State. And the governance of Rivers State should be done by indigents of Rivers State.
All right. Well,
so
understandably, yes.
He's a son of the Niger Delta, like all of us are of the Niger Delta. That's fine. But he's not an indigene of Rivers State.
All right, there's a question here I would like to ask you, Dame Cookey-Gam. I hear your position on this in terms of the legal remits of the sole administrator, even though appointed by the president. Does the emergency, the state of emergency declared by the president himself, not cover every action under the doctrine of necessity, including capital projects?
The first question we should ask, under what law, how are they appropriating the money? One of the sins of the governor was that he was operating without an appropriation law. Now, has the president assumed powers to run the Consolidated Revenue Fund of Rivers State? I don't believe that that is what was intended by the declaration of state of emergency. That cannot be what was intended. That Mr. President can now expend monies from the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the state, and by extension, the sole administrator. That cannot be the intention of the state of emergency. And if you listen to most citizens of Rivers State and of Niger Delta, our concern and our fears is that our monies are going to be used unjustly for things that we do not approve of or that are not authorized and not for the benefit of Rivers people. And everybody has alluded to the fact that possibly one of the reasons why we have this kind of crisis on our hands is because 2027 is at hand. I believe that Mr. President should be fair and just and realize that this is a grave thing that has happened, and he must be impartial, he must be just, he must be fair to the people of Rivers State, particularly remembering where he is coming from when he was governor of Lagos State. As a governor, he would never have taken this kind of thing. So we expect that, Mr. President, his declaration of state of emergency does not automatically mean that all funds in our Consolidated Revenue Fund will be expended without accountability, because that's what it is. Assuming today that the solo administrator exits office, who is he going to account to? Is he going to account to the governor when he comes back? Is he going to account to the National Assembly? Those are concerns, and they're very grave concerns by the people of Rivers State. And Mr. President should try and allay our fears by ensuring that only necessary and critical things are attended to during this interregnum, because that is what it is. Okay. Thank you.
Madam, I would like to explore the point about doctrine of necessity further, because Ayo mentioned doctrine of necessity. Is doctrine of necessity part of the Nigerian Constitution? That's one. Two, is it possible to import into the Constitution of Nigeria something that is not expressly stated in it? And if so, under what circumstances?
The doctrine of necessity is not part of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. A few times it has been used, but not in a circumstance such as this. Yes, there was political impasse in Rivers State. Yes, there were political disagreements. There have been political disagreements in all parts of Nigeria. Only 1 month ago, there was political disagreement in Lagos State, and nobody declared a state of emergency. There are legal ways to address such issues. So the doctrine of necessity does not arise at all with respect to what is happening in Rivers State. We see it as unconstitutional and usurpation of powers. And as much as possible, we appeal to Mr. President to, in the very, very future, in the next couple of months, bring us back to the state of normalcy. That is what is expected of him as the father of the nation. And we make that appeal. And we also ask the sole administrator to limit himself to matters that will allow us get back to a state of normalcy.
Well, thank you very much, Dame Cookey-Gam, for joining us on the morning show.